You've probably played a game before that felt off. Technically impressive, polished, expensive, yet it still felt completely hollow. And then you've probably played another game that was clunky, awkward, maybe even kind of broken, but it stuck with you anyway. That second game is the one people usually say has soul. Some of the most polished games ever made end up feeling completely lifeless and devoid of passion. Meanwhile, some of the jankiest games end up feeling more human, especially in comparison. When talking about soul, it's not about graphics or performance, it's about something much harder to define, something much more esoteric. Polish is much easier to describe. A product that's smooth, intuitive, accessible, and while these things sound good on the surface, they can very quickly spiral into sanding away personality. A game can be well made and still feel empty if it doesn't have anything it's trying to say. Soul, on the other hand, isn't something you can really measure, it's something you feel. The intention is expressive. It's the reason why some games stay in your head so long after you stop playing, even if they were rough around the edges, uncomfortable, or downright hostile at times. There's an entire category of games where this roughness isn't a flaw, but rather the point. People usually call it Eurojank, games that are awkward, uneven, but unmistakably intentional. These are games that prioritize deep systems and unconventional gameplay, rather than a polished and neat presentation. While they're usually lathered in bugs upon bugs, they also have a charm that high-budget games are missing. While the term sounds demeaning, it's usually used as a positive to signify a game that had labors of love put into it. These games don't sand their ideas down to become more accessible. They let their deep systems run wild, they let their mechanics feel awkward, and they let discomfort exist. Because removing these things would dilute the vision they're trying to express. It's commitment over comfort, and intention over polish. In games with soul, intention shows up in the systems themselves. Mechanics reinforce the tone, rather than getting out of the way or fading into the background. What separates these games isn't exactly the rough edges, it's that they're stubborn. They commit to an idea and refuse to soften it, even when doing so would make the game smoother or more comfortable. Soul appears when a game refuses to compromise its identity for comfort. The resistance isn't necessarily there to challenge you, it's there to reinforce the game's point, which, to be clear, doesn't always feel great when you're actually playing it. Pathologic is a game built entirely around that friction and refusal, tying together mechanics and story with no room for compromise. The premise alone sets the tone well enough, though, as you show up to an isolated town in the middle of a plague, immediately burdened with the Herculean task of stopping it. This sense of impossibility isn't just narrative fluff, it's immediately reflected in how the game behaves. It doesn't just resist the player, it straight up ignores them. Time moves forward whether you're ready or not. Quests expire without warning if you're too late, and other characters can just die if you don't prioritize helping them. The player is forced to choose between following the main story, helping someone sick, or just not starving. The game never pauses to let you catch up, because doing so would undermine the point. You're not the hero of the story, you're just another person trying, and usually miserably failing, to manage too much at once. Hunger as a mechanic works much in the same way. It's not presented as a fun little survival challenge, or a meter you can easily optimize. Food is scarce, if there's any at all, and they have absurd prices that can spike overnight. Eating never feels comfortable, only necessary to delay what feels inevitable. You're constantly backed into a corner to make small, uncomfortable decisions about what you can afford to lose. Never asking what's optimal, but rather asking what hurts least right now. Pathologic doesn't make hunger hard, per se, it makes it humiliating, and that humiliation is intentional. Both systems work together to keep you off balance. Not because the game wants you to fail, or because it wants to be cruel, but because it refuses to let you feel in control. What makes this all work is that these systems are never separate from the story. They're fundamental to it. To me, Pathologic isn't about being a hero who saves a town. It's about being a person dropped into an impossible situation and being asked to make sense of it anyway. The time pressure, the hunger, and the constant trade-offs all build upon the same idea, that this suffering is systemic, not personal. The town doesn't collapse just because you failed. It collapses because it was already broken, and you just happened to be inside of it. That's why games like this tend to linger. It's not because they're the best experiences, or even particularly fun, but because they're honest. They never bend themselves around the player, they ask you to bend instead, or break. When a game refuses to compromise its identity, even at the cost of accessibility or enjoyment, it leaves a stronger impression. Soul isn't a concept you can just patch in later, it's about how strongly the game believes in itself.